is Virginia Senator Tim Kaine, who in just over 24 months has distinguished himself as an international leader in foreign affairs. Senator Kaine is an influential member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee and the Armed Services Committee in the U.S. Senate. He's undertaken extensive travel in the Middle East since he took office in January of 2013, putting himself in the middle of the action. You know, talk is cheap. Senator Kaine goes out there personally to see what is going on. That's why we have so much respect for him on the John Fredericks Show, because he goes where the action is. I'm tired of talkers. I want people that actually try to get something done and get in the middle of the action. Hey, Senator, great to have you with us.
Hey, John, great to be with you. Thanks.
I want to start with the political prediction. We predict that Mark Warner is going to be the Democratic vice presidential candidate, regardless of who the nominee is. What do you think?
I think Mark would be. I mean, first, he would be great. It would be smart of whoever is the Democratic nominee to put him on the ticket, and he'd bring a lot to any ticket. I think that Hillary Clinton is going to be the nominee, and I saw Mark and Secretary Clinton together at this JJ dinner that we had in Northern Virginia a couple weeks back, and they've got a good relationship. They were talking policy. You know, they jumped right into it backstage. So I think he would be great, and that would really help the ticket win Virginia.
Okay, it's going to be Biden Warner, but I appreciate your input. Thank you so much.
Interesting.
Joe Biden's going to get in the race, and I think he's going to be the nominee. Either way, though, and I don't know. I think that's a long shot, but either way, Mark Warner is going to be the vice presidential nominee, because I think no matter who the nominee is, I think all roads to the White House lead through Virginia. If the Democrats win Virginia in 2016, Senator, I mean, you guys look at this stuff all the time. There's just no math. I mean, a Republican is not going to win without Virginia. It's impossible.
John, I'm obviously biased both for my party and for my Commonwealth, but I've kind of thought, and I remember saying this to President Obama in 2012, that Virginia was kind of a checkmate state. A Democrat can be president without Virginia, but it's hard to imagine a Republican getting to 270 electoral votes without Virginia. There's just kind of the way we are situated right now. We're in a unique position where if a Democrat wins it, it makes it hard for the Republican map to come together. And but the good news is, I think for everybody, Democrat, Republican, Independent, we were non-competitive, and so candidates from both parties didn't pay us much attention. We are now very competitive, and so that means all candidates must pay us attention, and I understand that you had a presidential candidate on the radio show yesterday, and that's proof of that proposition.
It is, no doubt, and I happen to be one of the only people in the United States in media that believe that Donald Trump is going to be the nominee on the GOP side, and he is not going to be elected president without Virginia. That's why I think I go back to Warner is going to be the VP choice, or you, one or the other.
Well, you know, it's about Virginia. I think that Mark and I both get mentioned as folks are, you know, the great mentioner is talking about potential running mates, but I think we get mentioned, you know, mostly because Virginia is Virginia. I mean, it's a little bit about us, but it's mostly because Virginia is Virginia, and Virginia is important. No. The nice thing is, for a state that was thought non-competitive to now be kind of called, along with Ohio and Florida, kind of key battleground states, you know, what a change it's been from 2008 to now to go to, you know, kind of key battleground position. Mm-hmm. And I'm very proud of that, and it just does mean that, you know, I'm proud of Virginia, and I want more people nationally paying attention to us, so.
Well, look, and not only has it gone from almost automatically red, now I think for the Republicans to win Virginia, a number of things has to happen because they're going to be the underdog going into the state, regardless of who the nominees are. Senator Kaine, I said this earlier, I really respect the fact that you have gotten off your behind and you've traveled extensively in the Middle East, meeting with so many leaders trying to figure out what's going on. You've been to Iran. You've seen this deal. What do you think?
So I have not been to Iran. Okay. I have not done that, but I've had a lot of conversations with folks about this. So here, let me give you the good news. Let me give you the challenge. So because I'm going to start with the good news because we all want a non-nuclear Iran, and we would all prefer it to be done diplomatically rather than having to resort to military action to stop their nuclear program. So everybody wants the same thing. It's just the strategy and the tactics. What's the right way to get there? So on the plus side, before diplomacy started in November of 2013, the interim negotiation and the interim deal, now the final deal, Iran had about 19,000 centrifuges. Under this deal, they knock it back to 6,000. Before it started, they had 10,000 kilograms of enriched uranium, enough for multiple nuclear weapons. They knock it back to 300 and cap it there. That is dramatically less than you'd need for one weapon. Before it started, they were moving toward a plutonium reactor in Iraq, Arak, the town in Iran. They are now dismantling that. Before diplomacy started, they allowed no inspection, so our intel about what they were doing was pretty murky. Under this deal, they're going to allow inspections to some significant degree for 25 years and in some other significant ways permanently. So that's all the difference between before the negotiation and this deal. And those are significant concessions, especially giving up 98% of your enriched uranium stockpile. Nobody else has put a deal on the table that would have accomplished those ends as far as I've heard. So those are the positives. Here would be a negative and then another question. Or here are concerns. The deal, everything I just said that's good is only good if it can be verified. So the whole question really, to me, revolves around the intrusive nature of the inspection regime. Do we have the ability to inspect anywhere so that we can detect cheating? Iran has a history of cheating and trying to hide what they're doing with respect to its nuclear program. Do we have the ability to do that essentially forever? Because we need that ability to make sure they're doing right so that if they're doing wrong, we can consider other options, including a military option to remove the threat of a nuclear Iran. I think, John, you're going to see that as the subject of most of the hearings and most of the debate. As you know, I was the author of the bill that gives Congress 60 days to review, and I was the co-author of it that gives Congress 60 days to review and dig into it. And you're going to see an awful lot of questions about this inspections regime. And then a second question that's kind of like a concern or a confusion is the deal lifts some sanctions against Iran and against Iranian individuals and institutions that are connected to nuclear sanctions, but it leaves other sanctions in place, sanctions that are connected to their terrorist activity or their human rights violations. And the confusion about lifting some sanctions but not others is something that is a little bit opaque right now, and we got to dig into it more.
Senator Kaine, what about the American, I guess, prisoners, hostages, however you want to classify them, being held in Iran against their will? Why weren't they part of the negotiation, their release?
John, I don't know the answer to that. And you're going to hear us ask the administration that as well. It is, this is a negotiation that is about Iran's nuclear program, and all the details about the deal are basically within the framework of their nuclear program. So we have other issues that we want things we want from Iran, and Iran has other things they want from us. But all of the terms of this deal are connected to the nuclear program. So, to what extent they talked about other issues, that's the kind of thing. In fact, we're going to have a hearing next Thursday with Secretaries Liu, Kerry, and Moniz before the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, and I know that we will ask that question.
Why do you think so many people have criticized this deal on two sides of the aisle and also around the world without even, obviously all the facts of it aren't out, but when you get something where everybody is saying how bad the deal is, isn't that going to put a lot of pressure on Congress that they're going to have to really have this thing scrutinized?
Well, John, if you ask sort of why have people criticized, a whole lot of people put out their statements trashing the deal before they'd read it. And why do they do that? Some because they don't trust Iran, some because they don't like the president, and some because they're not wild about diplomacy. And the only thing that gives me some hope in this, that we will do our job. See, when we wrote the bill, Senator Corker, me, and a couple of others, to give Congress a review, we set up a 60-day review period, which is pretty fast for Senate work, but still, it's 60 days because this is big and complicated, and we ought to take our time to understand it rather than just issuing snap judgments. But remember this, John, when the president started the negotiation in November of 2013, you heard exactly the same statements. This is a historic mistake. It's a big giveaway to Iran. America has lost. You heard people say that, but virtually everyone now will admit that the interim period was actually good. It was better than the status quo because Iran took their 20% stockpile and rolled it back to less than 5%. And they stopped moving forward on nuclear weapons, many aspects of the program, and they stopped progress on the Iraq plutonium reactor. And their economy didn't surge, and the sanctions regime didn't collapse. So a lot of people who trashed the negotiation at the start now actually admit that it was a positive. I hope even folks who put out their pre-written statements before they'd even read the deal saying it was bad, I hope that they will avail themselves of this 60-day review period and hear about it and then make their decision. And look, some are going to earnestly dig in and say that it's a bad thing for the reasons I described. Maybe they're not happy with this inspections regime, or they may have other reasons. But the ones who just issued the snap judgment, that's frankly contrary to the way that we set up this review process to make sure that Congress really can dig into it before we make a determination.
All right, so just for your information, I just got a text here from former Navy SEAL, House of Delegates member, Republican, Virginia Beach, Scott Taylor, says, I did read it. It is a terrible deal. So that's from Scott Taylor. Common Sense News Time.
Yeah, but I mean, okay, so you say it's a terrible deal. Tell me what the alternative is. What is the alternative plan that makes Iran give up 98% of their enriched uranium, two-thirds of their centrifuges, allow inspections for the first time, and dismantle a heavy water reactor? And I've been asking colleagues, okay, what's your plan to do this? The only plan that's been put on the table as an alternative is Senator Tom Cotton of Arkansas saying, hey, you know what? A war against Iran will only take 2 or 3 days. Maybe that's somebody's plan. I think that's a horrible idea if there is a diplomatic way to greatly disable their program. So if you say it's a horrible idea, are you with the Cotton plan, or do you have an alternative plan? What's the alternative?
All right, I'm sure we will get that shortly in from Delegate Scott Taylor. Tim Kaine. Senator, I've got to get to some domestic issues, but I can't have you on without asking you, why can't we get your war authorization initiative in front of the House of Representatives and the Senate? What is the holdup?
Well, John, this has really been painful. When the Democrats had the majority, we actually passed a war authorization in the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, but it was right in December, right as the majority was ending, and we couldn't bring it up on the floor because the idea was, well, the majority's about to change, we'll bring it up in 2015. And I will say, sadly, now 7 months into 2015, we're coming up on the year anniversary of the start of the war against ISIL. The majority in the Senate has not shown any interest in taking this up. I introduced a bipartisan authorization with Senator Jeff Flake in June. Now I will say this: we have had 3 committee meetings about the authorization. We had one Wednesday afternoon. Jeff Flake and I are trying to show, look, this can be bipartisan. We can do this. But I will say the meeting we had this week, people said, you're right, we definitely should do it. We owe this to our troops. But let's talk about Iran now. I think members of Congress, bluntly, are afraid to cast a yea or nay vote on this because they think it's going to be controversial, and they're just not showing the backbone that I think they ought to show, and it's extremely discouraging.
I just can't understand why we just can't debate the issue, and I think what you've done makes all the sense in the world, and you really feel like there's people just hiding under their desks in their offices because they don't want to really deal with this issue. I got to get.
And John, can I just say,
yes.
Joe Dunford, who is the Commandant of the Marine Corps, who is now the nominee to be head of the Joint Chiefs, he was before the Armed Services Committee for his nomination hearing last week, and I asked him, hey, what would you think about an authorization for the war against ISIL? And he said, let me tell you 2 things. It would be a very good idea. First, for our troops, they don't need much. All they need is some sign that the work they're doing has purpose, that the mission that they're on has meaning, and that the Congress and the American public support them. You need to send them that message, and you haven't sent them that message. And he said, secondly, to the extent that Congress isn't having a debate about this, what do our allies in the region think? What does ISIL think? They think that it's a matter of indifference to Congress. That's the wrong message to send, but so far it's been a lack of backbone, And we just got to keep pushing, especially with the year anniversary of the war coming up on August 8th. We got to keep pushing.
Well, you have to, and I think when you get to this, back to the Iran, when you get to that debate, I know a big thing that are upsetting a lot of people is the fact that you've got to give the Iranians a period of time before you go in. There's so far no Americans on that team that goes in, so I think there's just a lot of issues that are bothering people with this. So
yeah, and you're going to see those raised very significantly in the hearings we got coming up.
I've got to get to the domestic front in the time that we have, Senator. In December, in the wake of the now discredited Rolling Stone article, you went to Charlottesville, you met with students, and got some take on their concerns about campus sexual assault and their ideas on how to stop it. Some of the students expressed concern that they weren't taught about issues like consent and dating violence before coming to college, and that they thought some earlier education could be a key to prevention. As a result of that meeting, you introduced a bill that was passed yesterday by the Senate as part of the replacement to No Child Left Behind with a strong bipartisan vote, 81-17. Can you elaborate on it, and is it going to become law?
John, I really hope so. So it has to get through the House now, but it's very nonpartisan, and it has had great support from the education community, from the health community. But you're right, it goes back to an idea that students raised at UVA. While the Rolling Stone story was discredited in a really embarrassing way for that publication because they didn't do their fact-checking, the basic statistics about sexual assault on campuses, and frankly, generally among 16 to 24-year-olds, is very solid. You are most likely to be victimized by sexual assault when you're 16 to 24, and a lot of perpetrators are 16 to 24. So I was up at UVA. I was talking to the students in December. No reporters, no faculty, no administrators. I just wanted to hear from them about the challenge and how to deal with it, and also what not to do. Sometimes legislators want to do things that are the wrong thing. And one of the students said, when you come to college for the first time, you're 18, first time away from home, an orientation where they talk about sexual assault for 10 minutes and then don't get too many credit cards for 10 minutes and then drinking for 10 minutes, it's not enough to really help you understand, about good and bad relationships, where to go if you need help, how to report an assault if you've been victimized, what consent is, just basic stuff that as a 57-year-old I know, but as a 19-year-old away from home for the first time, a lot of people don't know. And so when the student said that to me, we would have, rather had more information earlier. I just kind of said to them, well, didn't you have sex ed or health classes? And a student said, and this is almost a direct quote, yep, and it was very heavy on the reproductive biology, but almost nothing about relationships and behaviors. And I thought, wow, that's quite an insight. And as we came back from that meeting, I thought about it. John, we're dealing with sexual assaults in the military. We're dealing with sexual assaults in the workplace and on college campuses. What we are really dealing with is a challenge that really afflicts 16 to 24-year-olds. And if we can do a better job of instructing them at the beginning of that age range, maybe we'll prevent some serious challenges. So Claire McCaskill and I introduced a bill that basically said if school districts get federal Title IV monies, and these are monies for student safety and health and student kind of well-being programming, if you get Title IV monies, you need to report what you are doing to promote safe relationship behaviors. We don't mandate what the curriculum is. We allow that to be, state and local flexibility, and because we didn't mandate a particular curriculum, educators got on board and they really liked the idea. But yeah, it passed yesterday, big bipartisan vote. It's also being introduced in the House, and I think there's some prospects there. But it all goes back to this conversation with students at UVA, and they brought up a good idea. And from bringing it up in December to a bill passing 81-19 in July, as you know, things usually don't work that quickly up in Washington.
Right. Well, and that's what I said earlier, Senator. I have so much respect for you because rather than sit in your office, you actually go out and talk to people, whether it's in Charlottesville or it's in Syria, and I think that makes a difference. We're almost out of time. I do have one more question, if I may. Yep. Senator, a lot of people very troubled in the last 2 days by, I guess, understanding now that Planned Parenthood is sending organs or selling organs for research to aborted fetuses. Do you find that troubling?
Oh yeah, no, the reports of it very troubling, absolutely. And so, look, there are laws against sale of fetal tissue. This is the kind of thing that is extremely troubling. The only cautionary note that I would throw in to the mix here is that you might remember this, John. There has been some prehistory of people going into Planned Parenthood offices and taping interchanges and then sort of editing them favorably to make a point. And in fact, the reason I know this is one of them happened in Richmond a couple of years ago, where somebody went in and tried to tape an interchange with a Planned Parenthood staffer and kind of edit it to make it seem pretty scurrilous. You got to get the full facts of whether this video was as is or whether there's been some nefarious editing to it. But certainly, if kind of a discussion about sale of fetal tissue in that way post-abortion would be highly troubling, and it ought to be looked at.
Do we have your commitment you're going to get to the bottom of it?
Oh, yeah, well, you have my commitment that it will be gotten to the bottom of. I mean, I know that there's a lot of organizations. The House has started an investigation of it. I don't know that the Senate has, but the Senate might, and I also understand that there's investigations at state levels about this. So there are multiple efforts already underway to dig into it.
Okay, Senator, we're out of time. We really want to thank you for being with us. Have a fantastic weekend. Thanks for all your hard work and for being the guy that really gets out there and tries to get to the bottom of issues by talking to real people. Thank you so much.
John, I'll tell you, one of the great things about being on Armed Services and Foreign Relations and getting over into Iraq and right on the Syrian border as I was recently is I'm seeing Virginians wherever I go, not only Armed Services, but we've got a really dedicated bunch of folks who are, in the USAID or State Department or the FBI or, other federal agencies, and they represent Virginia well around the world, and it's nice to be able to go and thank them.
All right, sir. Thanks for being with us.